Hello, hockey fans, and welcome back to another episode of High Flying, the podcast made for the fans.
By the fans.
As always, my name is Nolan, and I'm here with my co-host, Battle of the Bands champion, guitarist, and hockey aficionado, Jude Wessel.
What can I say? Not a big deal. I said last time, hopefully, this episode I would have good news to bring. I do have good news. We fucking won. Pretty cool. Lots of awesome prizes that we won. Shout out to all the other bands that competed. It was a good time. It was a bit of a stressful 6 weeks for sure. A little odd mixing music and competition, but all in all, we won. So not too bad. I've got nothing but good things to say about everybody that was involved in it. And yeah, excited for what's to come. We've got some, I guess, the three prizes that we knew about beforehand: 20 hours in the studio, which we're going in next weekend to take advantage of that. We got a gift card along McQuaid for a couple $100, and we got another gig at the Beer Shack that we're getting paid for in the summer, I believe. And then two other prizes, which I am not at liberty to disclose at this point, but they are pretty cool.
Yeah, I'm going to pretend I have the insider scoop on that, even though I don't. It's top secret. But congratulations, 20 hours in the studio. This means we should expect some Three Nines Fine new music coming out, hopefully. Can you at least tease that a little bit?
Yeah, definitely. We're going in the studio on the 18th and 19th. I think we're going to be rocking two 10-hour days, so full days. I'm hoping to get at least one song or at least the basic tracks of one song done, because we're planning to record as live as possible. If we could do it entirely live off the floor, that would be my preference, which would save us a lot of time. But there's things before we even start. You got to figure out the drum sound, make sure it's good, decide what amps we're going to use, and vocals always get redone after, just to make them as clear and as good as possible. So I, I I would hope by like early June would be my guess for the earliest that we'd have our first song coming out. So
There we go. And you heard it here first. 18th and 19th, they're recording early June, hopefully new music. The playoffs also start on the 18th and 19th. So if we are a little delayed with our playoff coverage, we apologize. But guess what? Once Jude is sitting in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame 25 years from now, it'll all be worth it.
let's hope so. Let's hope so.
There we go. We're not putting, what's the saying? Putting the cart before the horse there.
Yeah.
That's there we go. Predictions, they're my specialty. A lot happened in the National Hockey League. Last episode, we talked about a bunch of junior hockey players throughout the various leagues. And then we were gonna put out an episode with Jude's girlfriend, Steph, which is still coming out. Expect to see that at some point. But wow, it has been a busy time the past couple weeks in the NHL. Lots of firings at various positions. Not necessarily a firing, but we just had another one today in Seattle. Ron Francis has stepped down from the Seattle Kraken. Judging by Jude's reaction, I don't think he knew that.
I had not seen that. No.
Yeah, you can't see that on camera. I assume it's one of those situations where they gave him the dignity of resigning before he got fired. So maybe let's start there with that initial reaction, hearing it live on air.
I mean, not shocked at all. I think Seattle, there's really two roads you can go when you're an expansion franchise. You can choose to suck for the first couple of years and just accumulate capital. You can accumulate assets, lots of cap space, knowing that in a couple of years you'll be primed and ready to go with those young players to make a push. Or you can kind of do what Vegas did. Now, I don't know if they really planned for this to be their direction right away. But they got a bunch of good players right away that perfectly fit together, made a run to the finals, and they just have not looked back since. They just continued to trade out draft picks for players that made immediate impacts and perfectly work with the culture. And obviously, the organization is a well-oiled machine from top to bottom as they make the playoffs every year, and they won a Stanley Cup. So the Seattle Kraken, with Ronnie Franchise at the helm, chose to go right in the middle of those two things, which is the worst thing you can do, and just be okay for their first 5 years of existence. So no elite talent on that team. Never have had any elite talent on that team. They have one playoff series victory in the history of the franchise, and not a huge prospect of hope coming up. So I kind of think it was a matter of time. Ron Francis didn't really have a spectacular track record with the Hurricanes as a front office employee prior to becoming the Kraken GM and president. So am I shocked by this? No, I think they really needed some change. They need to breathe some life into that organization because it's been a rather underwhelming start to the history of the Seattle Kraken.
Yeah, I mean, you said it very nicely. I'll say it a different way. I think Ron Francis is one of the worst GMs I've ever seen in my life in the National Hockey League, or at any level of hockey. He's terrible. The best thing the Seattle Kraken ever did is promote him to the president just to get him out of that GM position. Obviously, as the president of hockey operations, they have not won a whole lot. So. I mean, I'm kind of neutral on the Kraken. I have no affiliation to them, but for all you Kraken fans out there, I'm happy he's gone. Um, 100% with Jude's take. If you're building a franchise, you kind of have to pick a lane. You can't flip-flop or sit in that murky middle ground. The murky middle ground is kind of the death to all hopes of improving a franchise, and I think Seattle had the wrong approach out of the gate. I think one of the worst things you can ever do is name Mark Giordano a captain and then trade him like 3 months later or
Yeah.
however quick after it was. That kind of maybe not necessarily anything against Mark Giordano, but that kind of defiles the importance of wearing the C. Like your new team, new culture. I get he was the captain of the Flames before and he had those leadership qualities, but if you're just going to ship a guy out, maybe don't give him a letter. That kind of left a bad taste in my mouth for that Seattle franchise right off the jump. I don't really like the way they approached the start of this franchise.
Yeah, 100%. We agree. And Ron Francis, he's just one of those gyms where kind of boring. There's never a bold move really that he's made to kind of take the franchise further, as they've gone on. It's really the same core group of guys that have been there for years now. And there's a lot of good players on that team, but nobody special. And they either weren't willing to or weren't able to come together with a trade package or a free agent offering to bring in like a real stud. I know they signed Montour and Chandler Stevenson a couple seasons ago, but again, both those guys, it's kind of like they went there because they gave them a fat bag, and not a lot of contending teams were going to be willing that kind of. Not a great legacy for Ron Francis as an executive. I mean, who knows? Maybe he gets another chance and goes somewhere else and fixes it. But at
I
least
wouldn't give him another chance. He's terrible. So
me
bad.
neither.
So
Me
bad.
neither. But at least he is one of the best players of all time. At least his playing career was very, very decorated, and
That's
yeah.
true. Top 10 all-time points. Might be top five all-time points, actually. I don't know the exact number where he sits, but he is up there for sure.
Yeah, weapon of a player, not so much as an executive.
Yeah. I guess oh yes, a little bit of a shout out to Sidney Crosby, seventh all time in NHL points now. Good on him. But just going back to Seattle before we move on there, I would consider them, you brought up a good point, like they don't have that much elite talent, if any. They don't really have a game breaker, play driving type player. But there's so many players I think on Seattle that I expected to be a lot better, and they've just been underwhelming. Like Chandler Stevenson was a huge part of that Vegas franchise, and he was surrounded with a lot of talent in Vegas that he isn't in Seattle. So granted, he's got to make it a little bit more on his own. But like outside of the faceoff circle, to me, Chandler Stevenson, his tenure in Seattle has been underwhelming. Their goaltending, Philip Grubauer had one insane Vezina nominee season, and then he kind of fell off a cliff, and he's slowly getting it back now. I don't really know what happened there, but their goaltending has been a little volatile. And you think of their young guys as well. Matty Beniers looked like he was going to come out of nowhere and be an absolute stud. And his career has just taken a deep dive right off the cliff. Um, Shane Wright, projected first overall pick, falls in the draft. He's never really lived up to his potential in Seattle. So as much as I want to put it all on Ron Francis, which I think like 99% of it is, as a former player, obviously you never played at an NHL level, but as a former player, do you think the lack of performance on ice is more to do just with scouting? Like, are they just picking the wrong guys for their systems? Or maybe this is a coaching problem as well.
I certainly don't think they've had a top tier coach there yet. I mean, they had Dan Bylsma. They're on Lane Lambert now, who was let go by the Islanders, and um, the Islanders have obviously been in the news lately because they had a coaching change, which we will get to. But the reason I bring that up is because in watching some other shows and reading some articles about why Lane Lambert and Patrick Waugh were let go by the Islanders, not a super structured coach, which I think when you don't have team like a team with any game breaking talent on it, with guys that can just overcome whatever system or systematic issues you may have with their offensive abilities, it's really important to have a structured coach so you can kind of get more out of a team than they might otherwise. So coaching's obviously always a part of it. I do think really it comes back to roster construction though, which falls at the feet of management because you look at this lineup and I mean they've got a ton of good players. I mean the first, I don't know, 10 guys, 11, 12, I'd say the first 12 guys on this roster are all very, very competent NHL players and, have solid two-way games, most of them. Maybe not so much Vince Dunn this year. Geez, bud, minus 27. That's rough. But um, for the most part,
Well, like at the time, Vince Dunn
right,
looked like he was going to be an elite defenseman coming
right.
out of St. Louis.
Yeah. And so, for the most part, I think the guys in the top half of this team, most teams in the NHL would take and would be able to find roles for. They're all competent players, but you look at this list, and I mean, Jordan Eberle is your top point scorer. Great player, but his best years are far behind him. And you brought it up. I mean, Matty Beniers had a rocking first season, great rookie campaign, kind of stagnated since. We look at Shane Wright, pretty
Shane
rough
Wright's
year this year. I mean,
abysmal.
uh, definitely taking a step back, and I think maybe he was kind of overhyped a little bit coming out of junior. He also unfortunately fell into that draft class where they lost a full season of hockey due to COVID. And if you didn't go over to Europe and play, the OHL just didn't have a season that year until right at the very end. So that's not really his fault, but something to consider. So yeah, overall, I do think any sort of failure to this extent is an organizational issue, and it starts from the top down always. But until they can infuse this lineup with some top end talent or decide that it's time to do what they probably should have done at the start of the franchise and just strip it right down and then build back up. I mean, they're always just going to be in the spot where they're barely missing the playoffs because they don't have any players that are going to put you above an Anaheim at this point with all their young skill, or a Vegas or an Edmonton that are established in the division.
Yeah, and I think if it were me, not that I have much experience sitting in the front office of an NHL team, but I think I'm in the strip it down position. I look at this team and you're right. They do have a lot of serviceable pieces. Not elite level, but like guys they can get value for. You think what the team up the I-5 got, the Canucks for trading away their pieces, I'd argue that Seattle has a wealth more value or more value. I don't know what a wealth more is. I don't know what I'm talking about. Not constructing clear English sentences. But I think, you when you have guys like Berkeley Catton, I saw him when he was in Spokane, Riker Evans, these young players, obviously they're not having a great year this year, but you can't rely on rookies to kind of save you. Um, I think you move some of those bigger pieces, the older guys, the Larsons, maybe you move Jaden Schwartz, and really strip it down and get younger so you don't have to be stuck in that murky middle. You don't have to go through a deep, treacherous rebuild like some of the other teams will. And hopefully in 3, 4 seasons, you can turn the corner and be a playoff team.
Yeah, and we've been on Seattle for a while, so I won't expound what you just said too much, but you look at a guy like Capo Caco, 38 points in 60 games plus 14. I feel like he's had a pretty solid tenure since he got to Seattle. Could you get a second round pick for him? I think definitely. Like you're saying, there's a number of guys who have solid resumes in the NHL that you could start to accumulate a pretty good amount of draft capital for. So it'll be interesting to see how they move forward with a new voice atop their pecking order.
Now, speaking of Ron Francis, as I mentioned, not the only guy to step down since our last episode. Well, he is the only guy to step down. The other four didn't do it voluntarily. The other four got fired. Um, we had two coaches and two GMs. What do you wanna talk about first, my friend? Do you want to go coaches first or GMs first?
Let's do coaches. They're more recent.
Coaches. Okay, so here's the thing. Here's the thing. I think I was surprised by both of these coaching changes. And for me, I find it weird that all these changes come with like between 9 and 6 games left in the regular season. I think like that was the weird part for me. Vegas, I'm not as surprised that they made a coaching change. I'm just really surprised at who they brought in. Whereas the Islanders, I felt the coaching change was potentially a little bit unnecessary. So I'll leave it up to you to decide which team you think we should start with.
Well, I'll start with Vegas first because we have very similar mindsets on this. I was not super shocked when I saw that Bruce Cassidy was going to be let go just based on how this season had gone and with the players they have on that team, the way they were performing. I do think a lot of it falls at the feet of the goaltending because you look at the advanced metrics for this team and just the history of this team, not much has changed really from, a couple seasons ago when they were Stanley Cup champions, other than the fact that their goaltending has been Ottawa Senators level abysmal this year. Bottom of the league, cost them so many games. Plus, their shooting percentage is down like crazy. So I mean, I'm not watching every Golden Knights game, but they're not getting lucky with the bounces. So it wasn't so much of a shock to me that Bruce Cassidy was let go. A coach like that, from all reports, he's a hard driving guy, can wear on players after an amount of time, which is good if you have a veteran roster, but it does have a shelf life. The fact to me that Tortorella was the guy they brought in to replace him initially was shocking to me. I couldn't believe it. Like, how many chances is this guy going to get? But then you sit back, you think about it. Okay, well, Torts seems to have a very, very similar and predictable timeline when it comes to franchises. He comes in and immediately does make good improvements because, like we're saying, he's a structured coach. He's hard on guys. He can whip you into shape, and he does have pretty good results when he first gets to a franchise. But like I was just saying with Cassidy, over time, the benefits start to wear off as players kind of tune him out and can't really deal with the hard driving nature for a prolonged period of time. But in this instance, where they're not committed to him after this season, it's just if we make the playoffs and the playoff run, I actually kind of love the move because Torts will come in. He said in his introductory press conference, he's not going to change a whole lot. He's going to rely a lot on the leadership of the team and the assistant coaches, and he's just there to help. He just wants to help. So I kind of like the move actually because he'll whip the boys into shape. It's a new voice, a team that obviously has enough talent, I think, to go on a pretty deep run. It's just a matter of getting them ready to go every game and seeing if Torts maybe is able to light a spark under the ass of the boys there. So we'll see what happens. The Islanders,
Well, before we get to the Islanders, can
yeah,
we stay on Vegas
go
for
for
a
it,
second?
go for it.
Because I want to say too, and you mentioned it, like the goaltending has been abysmal. They're looking like Philadelphia's goaltending last year. Um, and they can't buy a goal, right? And like everyone's seen the stat at this point that the team that has spent the most time trailing in the National Hockey League is the Vegas Golden Knights. Insane to me that they're challenging for first in the Pacific Division with that stat, but like I guess good on him. So I agree. Like I kind of figured Bruce Cassidy would be going at some point. I'm a little surprised they didn't do it sooner. I think that's my only thing. I believe is 9 games left that they made this coaching change, which you don't see happen too often. But to your point, we've seen it time and time again that when there is a change, teams generally perform very well under a new coach. We've seen it with the Canucks several times at the end of the season when they made a coaching change. They would start winning games when they were supposed to be losing. Um, you know, Even a GM change. We saw it in Buffalo, changing to Jarmo Kekalainen. I gave him a really hard time. Now Buffalo's challenging for the top spot in the Eastern Conference. My bad. I apologize, Jarmo. Um, maybe GMs aren't my strong suit. So I totally understand the mentality of a change. We see it in Pittsburgh all the time. Dan Bylsma getting fired, Michelle Therrien getting fired. You bring in Mike Sullivan. You win a Stanley Cup. I totally get it. My thing is looking at John Tortorella's history. He seems to do a lot better with younger players, and he seems to do a lot better at putting structure in place where teams may lack identity. We've seen early success with him in Columbus. He did fairly well. He didn't make the playoffs with Philadelphia, but I think he was pushing Philadelphia in the right trajectory. I think that's what surprised me about this was just they already kind of have an identity established in Vegas. And they have very strong veteran leadership. It starts with Mark Stone, and these guys have been around the league for a long time. They've won a Stanley Cup. Obviously, a few guys have changed. They've lost a lot in the back end. No more Nick Hague, no Alex Pietrangelo. But I was really surprised to see John Tortorella be the guy that they acquire when they already have that natural leadership and that natural identity in place. However, as you mentioned, quite pleased that he said he's not really going to change anything. I think that's the right approach here. And he kind of comes from an era of the last of the old school coaches. He left the league around the same time as Mike Babcock did. And there's kind of like this old school mentality, and I don't think a lot of coaches learned from their mistakes, and I don't think they've learned about sort of the new school culture of hockey. I think John Tortorella is one guy who's learned and he's adapted, and that's why he keeps getting brought back. And they have not lost under him yet, so we'll see how they do.
Yeah, I agree. One thing I am excited about for Torts is that his last couple stops in the NHL have been with teams that you look at the rosters, regardless of what he does, really, they weren't contending teams. Nobody expected Columbus while he was there or Philadelphia to have any real shot at contending. And I do think he got more out of those teams than maybe their talent would have deserved. So seeing him with a team that does have a wealth of talent and the ability to potentially go on a run here, I think if anything, it's a bit of drama for the league going into
Right.
playoffs. It's just an extra thing to want to tune in for. Now, two of their wins, he is 4-0 as coach there. Two of their wins have come against your Vancouver Canucks. So do those really count? No. But anyways, record says 4-0. They don't ask how, so we'll see how that moves going forward.
And you know what? I do potentially see a path to a Vegas Golden Knights Stanley Cup final appearance here. I do.
Really? Even with the goaltending?
Even with the goaltending, I see a path. I see a path. It's a very specific path. Last year, obviously, a little, not, well, I was going to say a little gentleman. He's not that short, but he's shorter. A little gentleman by the name of Quinn Hughes changes things a little bit. But Vegas looked like they owned the Minnesota Wild last year, and Minnesota's depth down the middle really concerns me. So, in a world where Vegas makes it out of the Pacific Division and Minnesota beats Dallas in the first round, I can see Vegas having a chance, not a guaranteed win, but a chance against the Minnesota Wild in a Western Conference final. So maybe not all hope is lost for this team, despite their lack of production this year.
Fair. And I know we're gonna move on to the Islanders here, but I will say I'm more excited for playoffs this year than I have been in a while. Well, really, since 23, 24 when the Canucks were in it, because there's so many new teams that are gonna crack it this year. The race, especially in the East to the final, has been electric. There's lots of different teams coming up with new cores, new guys leading the charge that we haven't had in a long time. I think recently, the last 3 or 4 years, it's been a lot of the same teams that everybody expected to win over and over again. So it'll be fun this year to see if some new blood can rise to the top of the league.
Yeah, absolutely. Like right now in the East, we got one, two, three teams in the East that didn't make the playoffs last year, sitting in a playoff spot. Um, None of them we thought would get anywhere close. We don't have to go into that right now. That can be for later on down the road. But if you watched or listened to our preseason predictions, we did not have a lot of those teams penciled in. And we look at the West and say two teams in the West right now in playoff spots that weren't there last year, but seeing five out of the 16 teams that make it, we got five new ones. So that's five opportunities for some excitement, some good series there. Moving to the New York Islanders. This one I'm a little bit surprised that they made the change, especially since the coaching change. For those who don't know, Patrick Waugh is out in New York. I'm especially surprised at who they hired because they hired probably the coach I give the hardest time out of any coach in the National Hockey League. I've had very harsh words for Pete DeBoer, and I'm also really surprised with the timing of it because they were competing for a playoff spot. They had the opposite of effect. They've now lost every single game under Pete DeBoer. Vegas have won four in a row. The Islanders have lost four in a row. So, do you want to shed us some light with your thoughts on this one, my friend?
Yeah, I was surprised to see it as well, mostly because I don't really pay the Islanders a whole lot of attention during the season. I'll be honest, it's all the way across the continent, and they're the second biggest team in their market. So really, the Islanders every year, kind of like the Kraken, I just pencil them in. They might miss the playoffs by 2 points. They might make the playoffs by 2 points. Like they'll be right on that line, not out there. No, truly elite talent on the team. From everything I've read since this happened, it seemed like it was kind of inevitable. Matthew Darch, their GM, not super pleased with the job Patrick Waugh has been doing defensively. In the advanced metrics, they're one of the worst teams in the league in terms of high danger chances and slot chances. I think Ilya Sorokin's probably going to win the Vezina this year for the job he's done in keeping them afloat in the playoff race. And Matthew Darch, his comments have kind of been that yeah, it's a move for now. Maybe, make a push for the playoffs and get in. But I think really Peter DeBoer was going to be the belle of the ball probably for coaching hires in the offseason, given his resume and what he's been able to do. I know you don't like the guy very much, but
His
he
resume of losing all the time when it counts.
see, but okay, well, I'll get into that in a sec. But anyways, he was going to be the belle of the ball when it came to coaching hires in the offseason. So I think they were getting ahead of things and hiring him now. I think this is more of a future hire, knowing that Patrick Waugh wasn't going to be coming back, and it didn't look like they were going to be pushing super hard for that
Hi,
last playoff spot, anyways. So
hire him when you miss the playoffs. Like I believe that at the time they made the fire in Philadelphia, what somebody can correct me if I'm wrong. I think Philadelphia was just slightly ahead. But like this is a team that I don't think anyone thought would compete for a playoff spot, or at least like we didn't, right? Like, everyone we talked to had the Islanders missing the playoffs. We both had the Islanders missing the playoffs. I said, because I know goaltending is my specialty. I said Ilya Sorokin will be the guy that makes or breaks this team. He's done a phenomenal job. Obviously, Matthew Schaefer has helped out immensely. They lost a few guys along the way. Romanov, that injury really hurt them.
Paul
Up
Mary.
front, Bo Horvath very well up front. He's been lighting the lamp. But they were third in their division when I believe I had them in sixth. I can't remember what you and Gage had them, but I know you guys had them out as well. So to me, they're already punching above their weight class. And you can look into advanced metrics all you want. For me, it comes down to wins and losses. And that's why I said I think the timing of this doesn't make sense to me. If you're going to make this change and get rid of Patrick Waugh, you could have done it way sooner, established a new team identity with whatever coach you bring in. You do it with less than 10 games left. And look, it's costing you. You miss the playoffs. To me, a playoff appearance, even if it just comes down to selling more tickets and bringing in more revenue, a playoff appearance is way more valuable than missing the playoffs and securing Pete DeBoer at this point, especially since they're likely to not get a high draft pick from that. And so, to me, so what if you keep Patrick Waugh and you miss the playoffs and you decide to fire him after? Who cares, right? Like Pete DeBoer's not going to be off the board in
But
in 10 games, right? Like
well, you can say that, but obviously,
how
I don't
many
know. I
teams have
think
fired their coach since then? Zero. Because it's just really weird timing of it. And I do truly believe that Pete DeBoer isn't a good fit for contending teams. For a development team, absolutely. If you have a group of young guys and you need somebody to set the tone and develop talent, Pete DeBoer is your guy. If you're a team that wants to compete for a playoff spot, if your goal is to break that mid-ground bubble and have success, he's not your guy. Because what's going to happen if you make the playoffs? His systems have shown he doesn't get it done when it matters. And yes, that's my opinion, but that's also the track record, and the numbers don't lie.
so. I honestly, I completely disagree on that because I compare Pete DeBoer a little bit to a guy like Paul Maurice. He coached in the NHL for more than 20 years before getting a Stanley Cup victory. And every coach will tell you at the end of the day, if you don't have the players to win, you're not going to win. And I think Pete DeBoer, I mean, you're almost a lock to get to the Western Conference Finals of the Stanley Cup Finals with this guy as your coach. He's very structured, which is completely opposed to how Patrick Waugh had been running the team. The last couple of years, defensively, they were abysmal. They were completely relying on Ilya Sorokin to keep them afloat. So I think with DeBoer, it just comes down to now, do I think the Islanders are the team with the horses that are going to be able to go win the cup? No, I'm not saying that, especially not this year. But if you look at his teams over the years, I mean, he's lost twice in the finals. Pretty tough. His game seven resume is immaculate. I mean, I believe he's undefeated. He's like 8-0 in game sevens. And you look at the runs with Dallas, I mean, they're going up against the Oilers. It's hard. Like you're going up against McDavid and Draisaitl when they're just in God mode in the playoffs and weren't going to lose. So I do like Pete DeBoer as a coach. I think like a guy like Paul Maurice, it might just take finding the right fit eventually. Like one of these times, I think it will come through. And with the Islanders, they've got some pretty good prospects coming up through the system. With a full year, a full training camp, it'll be different. Schaefer's going to be, I mean, oh my God, the guy's 18 this year. I can't imagine how much better he's going to be next year coming in as a 19-year-old. So I will agree with you. I think the timing was very odd for Vegas and the Islanders. There's no way they didn't know that this was a possibility. Obviously, they'd been thinking about it probably long before it came down, and you are kind of hamstringing your team when you leave them only a couple of games left to get acclimated to a new coach and a new way of doing things. But for the Islanders specifically, I think it was a future hire. They're looking forward with Darch obviously wanted to get his guy before he left other teams the opportunity to snag him up because, like we know, when the season ends, I'm sure there'll be a number of other coaches who get let go. So we'll see what happens. But yeah.
Yeah, like I still think you can snag him if you miss the playoffs. I am going to rebuttal you on Pete DeBoer a little bit because I do agree. I think a lot of people said the same thing about Paul Maurice that he couldn't win, including myself. I'm guilty of it, saying it of Paul Maurice. And first of all, when I say that you can't win, it doesn't mean you're a bad coach, right? Like, objectively, we've seen some pretty bad coaches, Adam Foote being one of them. So it doesn't mean you're a bad coach at all. Pete DeBoer is a very good coach. Paul Maurice is a very good coach. I just don't think Pete DeBoer is the right guy coming into a playoff spot. And you mentioned that, at the end of the day, if you don't have the team, you're not going to win. And if you look at who Paul Maurice had, the Winnipeg Jets never had a cup contending roster until maybe last year, and then they blew it. And his Carolina days, Paul Maurice. I was young enough where I was not following much Carolina Hurricanes hockey, so I can't comment on that too much. Whereas I like Pete DeBoer, and I would argue he did have the teams. Um, in maybe thanks to Doug Wilson, he was one goalie away from having the team in San Jose. Um,
Don't even get me started, dude. Don't even get me started. Martin Jones, fuck.
and in Vegas, he certainly had the team. He certainly had the team in Vegas. Dallas, you mentioned, they went up against the Oilers, but it's not like the Oilers weren't a beatable team. Yes, you run into Connor McDavid, but I also kind of look at hockey as probably the most team-oriented of the team sports. Like you don't just rely on one guy, if that makes sense. Like I feel like yeah, how am I trying to say? I feel like if you look at the NBA, you can have an elite top five player in the league that can carry you through a series. In hockey, unless it's a goalie, I think it's very rare that that happens. So yes, you run into Connor McDavid, but that's happened multiple times, and they never got past that. So, that's probably enough of me slandering Pete DeBoer. Once again, I don't think he's a bad coach. I just think he's the wrong fit for this situation. But I do think he did have the teams and still wasn't able to get a cup win in there.
I mean, Jake Ottinger was outperformed by Stuart Skinner. That's all I'll say on that, and we can move on to GMs.
Two GMs, once again, two GMs gone, both in the Eastern Conference. Do you have a preference of which one to start with? You started the coaching thing. I'll let you decide where we go with GMs first. I have a lot to say about one more than the other.
Okay, let's do Toronto first. Biggest market in hockey, hockey mecca, and I'm kind of looking forward to being able to slander the Leafs a little bit. So let's go there.
Yeah, so first of all, I just want to say I don't think Brad Treliving's a GM or a bad GM. I think he's a good GM for the most part. Am I surprised he got fired? Not really. I probably would have fired him too. I thought he did a fairly good job in Calgary. Um, what I have to say about Brad Treliving's tenure in Toronto, I never thought I would say this, but I really like Kyle Dubas. Comparing the two tenures. I never thought I'd say that. Wow, Kyle Dubas did a really good job.
That's fun.
you know, the the thing with this Toronto team, obviously the expectation was that they were going to win a lot. I had very high expectations for them. I had them finishing top of the division. You probably had the more realistic expectations. You had them in third, accounting for some of the key players they've lost, Mitch Marner being one of them. You know, obviously you bring in Matthias Michelli. He did absolute jack shit. Um, I think this is just a whole culture issue, more so than just a GM. I think you probably, and I'm really surprised actually with Craig Berube behind the bench that this is a culture issue because he is one tough motherfucker. And I don't know if he's lost the room or not, but I think you can kind of sum up the Leafs season based on their response when Matthews got hit by Gudis, or in other words, their lack thereof. Like, this is a really soft, spineless Leafs team. And there's a whole whackload of issues. Um, I think coaching is the problem. Like I said, I'm guessing Craig Berube has lost the room because it definitely wasn't like that when Berube was coaching in St. Louis. I think this is a lack of offensive production problem. I think this is an old back end problem. I think this is a poor leadership on the ice problem. You know what? Out of any Canadian team, the Maple Leafs, I think, are probably in the worst position going forward. And change has to start somewhere. So who are you going to start with the GM? I think is a good time to fire him. And honestly, for Brad Treliving, it probably helps his career in hockey that he didn't have to go any further with this team.
100% agree. Of all the Canadian teams, the Leafs to me are in the most dire position. They have traded away all their picks and prospects in the last couple of years, a lot of them to division rivals in an attempt to roster and try and make a push. To me, the Brad Treliving tenure was doomed from the start because, from all reports, Brendan Shanahan would not let him trade Mitch Marner before his no trade clause kicked in, which I think sealed his fate right from the get-go. There was so much evidence at the point where he was hired that those four guys were not going to lead you to the promised land. And once they decided not to move off Marner and give him all the control for a potential trade, the writing was on the wall. We saw what happened the last year he was there. They have a complete melt. They go up 2-0 against the Panthers, have a complete meltdown, choke it. One of the worst Game 7 performances I've ever seen, just completely uninspired and heartless. And then from there, there was not much he could do. I think Marner left for basically nothing. They had traded away all of their good assets to try and bolster the roster while he was there. And
They traded away Nicola Waugh, who they got for
right.
Marner as well.
Actually, flipping him for a first round pick, not bad. But the thing is, you traded Mitch Marner for fucking Nicola Waugh, and basically that was it. So it's just, you can't be letting 100-point guys leave your organization and getting nothing in return. And yeah, I don't think there was much he really could have done this season. They were just not equipped to win, didn't have the goaltending, didn't really have they were one injury away all season, which I think the Canucks were in a very similar spot last year and this year. And that's not a good place to be going into the season. So with the Leafs, I mean, I think you have to tear it all down, but they don't have anything really coming up right now. They've spent the last 10 years trying to contend and very much underwhelming in that aspect. And so they just don't really have anything in the cupboard. I think they're in for a lot of years of pain, which, haha, to be honest. But so are the Canucks, so I can't laugh too hard. But, at least the Leafs have it worse.
Yeah. And I just want to say, like, and this isn't necessarily a GM thing at this point, but you talked about that series with Florida, and you think about what it takes to win a Stanley Cup, and you need some sort of grit and perseverance and physicalness in your mentality, at the very least, to wear down your opponents over a 7 game series. And you look at the teams that are in a playoff spot this year and teams that went deep into the playoffs last year. Florida may be one of the grittiest teams in the league, and obviously that's led them to the promised land a couple times. I think there's Toronto should be embarrassed, right? Like, I think players on that team should be embarrassed. Morgan Riley, you should be embarrassed for all the losing you've done to be that soft and squishy this season when you could have stepped up with some physicality. You think you would want it more. Morgan Riley should be embarrassed. John Tavares should be embarrassed. The great leader of the New York Islanders comes over to Toronto, does nothing in Toronto to help this franchise win, gets stripped of the C, creates a poor locker room culture. John Tavares should be embarrassed. Austin Matthews should be embarrassed. I know he was the one lying on the ice. He can't fight for himself at that point when he's hurt, but Austin Matthews, you should be embarrassed. People are going to say, "Oh, well, he won a gold medal. He was captain of USA." When I think of that USA team, I don't think of him as a leader. I think of guys like Quinn Hughes leading that team. I think of the Kachucks leading that team. I think of Jack Hughes scoring a golden goal. I think of Brock Nelson bringing in that veteran leadership and expertise. Matthews didn't lead that team. The Maple Leafs should be embarrassed. That's all I got to say.
All right. Well, you came out swinging very hard. One thing, I don't think USA didn't win the gold medal. Canada lost it. Second off, Quinn Hughes has his comments recently have kind of shown not much of a leader either. Apparently, not much of a locker room galvanizer. But yeah, Toronto's just in a terrible spot. It's been a rough decade. I mean, it's weird. It's one of the weirdest tenures I've ever seen of a team. It's been a great decade. They made the playoffs every freaking year, but every year seem to find a way to lose in a more heartbreaking fashion, which makes it all the worse. But we'll see how they move forward. Keith Pelly, who runs MLSC, said that they're going for a data-driven guy, which proof's
What
just
does that
always in the
mean?
results. You know
Anybody
what?
for
If it
me?
turns out great and they build a great team, then good for them. Data's the best. If it doesn't work out, everybody's going to say, "Well, you should have got a hockey guy." So
Hey, you know
we'll
who's
we'll
a
see what
data-driven guy? Kyle Dubas.
Kyle Dubas,
You know
indeed.
whose
Well,
team is in a playoff spot right now? Kyle Dubas.
and the whole reason he got fired was because he wanted to break up the core four, and Shanahan said, "Oh, absolutely not. We're not doing that." So I think all of this comes back to Brendan Shanahan. He did a great job starting their rebuild, accumulating all those great players. I think it was really clear after probably their first two or three playoff losses that wasn't going to work with those guys, and they just were completely pot committed and would not let go of the dream. So yeah, suck it, Toronto. Honestly, that's all I got to
Yeah,
say about Toronto.
there we go. Moving on to the other team that fired their GM. Tom Fitzgerald is out in New Jersey. I feel a little bit bad for Tom Fitzgerald. Now I know I went on a 10-year for the last however 20, 30 minutes saying that results are the only thing that matters. And if you look at Tom Fitzgerald's record, the 5 years he was in New Jersey, the numbers aren't great. However, I do think he built some very good structure to this team. And I do think he was hit with a lot of unfortunate injuries throughout, this team's time. Getting both Jack and Luke Hughes, that's awesome. There's a lot of key pieces there. Jesper Bratt, Nico Hischier, Dougie Hamilton, I think Brett Pesce as well, player who can contribute. Timo Meyer maybe hasn't been as much of a player as he was on San Jose throughout his tenure there. But all in all, I think Tom Fitzgerald has done a pretty good job at structuring this team. The crazy thing is, if New Jersey was in the Western Conference, they'd be 1 point out of a playoff spot right now. But instead, they're at the bottom of the Metro or near the bottom with only the Rangers below them. So I think he's a little bit hard done by. Um, if you look at the numbers, yeah, the numbers aren't great in New Jersey. I get it, but I really like him. I really like Tom Fitzgerald. I'm sure we're going to see him again in the NHL at some point.
I'm inclined to agree with you. I think overall his tenure is kind of mired by injuries at really unfortunate times. Like last year, pretty not too long before the playoffs, Jack Hughes goes down with a season-ending injury, and it's like, okay, well, any team in the league, if your best player goes down, what are you going to do going into the playoffs? You're not going to be positioned for success. I mean, Markstrom this year had a god awful season by his standards. Like I'm saying, I think I can live with a GM like Tom Fitzgerald, who time and time again made moves. And even there's an element of risk in a lot of them, like bringing in Palat, like I said, bringing in Brett Pesce, trading for Timo Meyer. Like he was trying. He did things. He made moves that were actively trying to further this team and bring up their floor and their ceiling. And sometimes it just doesn't work out. Sometimes it's injury. Sometimes it's timing. You know, didn't have a lot of super young guys come up and be impactful right away, but it's tough to do that when you're pushing for the playoffs every year and on that bubble. So I think he'll get another crack at it. To me, he strikes me as kind of the antithesis of a Ron Francis, where Ron Francis just never does anything. Just rolls
Right.
in with the same team every single year and says like, "Well, we believe in, pushing from the bottom. Our guys will take a step this year and be better." So I respect more a guy like Tom Fitzgerald who was willing to take chances and risks and try and switch things up if it wasn't working. But yeah, the Devils have been stagnant for a while, and obviously it was an underwhelming season for them. So some change could be expected. But yeah, I would expect to see him again get another chance in the league.
I think the two most interesting things with this storyline um, are really going to be what do the New Jersey Devils look like the next 3, 4 years under a different GM? How does a new GM either add to the core or subtract from the core that they've struggled to make the playoffs with? So that's one. And two is where does Tom Fitzgerald go? Because really there's three teams right now that are going to be looking for a GM next year. And I think all three teams would be lucky to have a guy like Tom Fitzgerald. Two teams have an open GM slot right now. The Toronto Maple Leafs, as we previously mentioned, the Nashville Predators as well. As Ethan just mentioned to us earlier, I don't know, Ethan, can they hear you right now or no? No, okay, they can't. We can't hear Ethan right now. But Ethan pointed this out earlier in the show to myself and Jude. The Nashville Predators just inquired about Patrick Alvin. I would love to go into a rebuild with Tom Fitzgerald. Um, so I'd be shocked. I'm a little surprised that the Canucks declined permission for Patrick Alvin to talk to Nashville. They're probably just waiting until the end of the season. Um,
I was gonna say, correction, not Alvin. They're Abbotsford's current GM. They denied permission to speak,
oh, Abbotsford's current GM. I thought it was with
which
Alvin that they asked.
no. So
Okay,
I think would lead me to believe that Ryan Johnson is definitely in contention for
for
the
the
Canucks.
Canucks GM job next year. Okay,
Yeah, which I wouldn't be mad at. I mean, promoting people from within your organization does it can be a good thing because it shows people that, you know what, if you come here, you're not going to be stuck. We are going to look at guys if you do a good job, there is an opportunity to move up, but I would not be mad at Tom Fitzgerald either. Now, the thing is, not sorry to cut you off here a little bit, but
go ahead, go ahead.
I think for an organization like the Canucks, which has been an utter dumpster fire the last 2 years, going to be really hard to convince quality people to come in here with the situation they reside in. I think it's pretty well known at this point. The owner is a meddling son of a bitch most of the time, has no appetite for prolonged losing, even if it's losing with intention, which I've said this before. There's
The
there's
owner has
losing
that.
by accident and there's losing on purpose. And this owner is fully fine to lose by accident, to try and win and suck, and is completely unwilling to lose on purpose for a few years to create a 10 to 15 year run of excellence.
So not the point, but the owner might be having the FBI come after him. So that's fun. I don't know if you heard about that little scandal.
I honestly I don't want to get into that too much because we have seen another obviously way bigger media outlet in Vancouver than us get fucked pretty hard covering the story without all the facts. So I don't think Alvin has anything to do with that really based on everything I've heard and read. So we will
No,
leave
not
that to
Alvin,
the.
Aquilini,
Oh, sorry.
Francesco Aquilini.
That's what I meant. I don't think Aquilini really has anything to do with what's going on there. Kind of just an unfortunate byproduct. Daily hives and some shit right now for that. So gonna leave that one to the big boys there. But yeah, the Canucks. I think everyone knows Nick Kyprios, last week came out and said that Alvin's telling people he doesn't expect to survive the season, which is honestly no shock to me because
Good. He has
um,
self-awareness. That's
it,
good. That's more than Ron Francis has.
exactly. Honestly, he's done a bad job. They came in here, rushed the process way too fast, pushed all the chips in the middle of the table in that 23-24 season, built a solid team, and then guess what? Let everybody fucking walk right after. Didn't re-sign any of the fucking good players. Let them all walk, and it goes back to me entirely choosing Miller over Horvat. God awful decision in hindsight. God awful decision.
Well,
No, there was no foresight there. And at the time, I mean, you know me. I'm an eternal optimist when it comes to the Canucks. So whatever they do, I'm going to try and convince myself it's the right thing. Up to this season, I've changed my tune a bit. Now I'm like, all right, this team's just fucked. But back then, I was like, okay, well, whatever. Horvat's a better, or Miller's a better player right now. He's kind of worth the money, 99-point season, all that stuff. In hindsight, god awful decision. Horvat was younger. He was a leader. He got along with Pettersson and Hughes. Miller, I mean, we can see how the Rangers are doing this season. I don't think he's a very good culture builder. So yeah, all in all, I think you cannot go into. I mean, I'm hearing a lot of stuff too that Adam Foote might stick around for the start of next season, and
oh, that's a mistake.
I have I have two thoughts on that. One is, do I think he's done a particularly good job this season? No. Do I think it was a good idea to hire a coach with absolutely no experience and surround him with a coaching staff that was also rather inexperienced? No. On the
Well,
other
and
hand,
you do it largely based off of his relationship with the player who's no longer on the team.
right, right. Once again, no foresight from this management group. Quinn Hughes was never going to stay. He was never going to stay. What reason did he have to stay? That
You
being
were
said,
you were hopeful. You were a little
oh,
hopeful.
like I said before, I was an eternal optimist. I didn't want to give up before it was obvious, but was Adam Foote put in a position to succeed with this roster and this team? Looking at it from an unbiased point of view, absolutely not. There was no chance in hell anybody was going to come in here and get this team to punch above their weight class. It just wasn't going to happen. There just wasn't enough talent.
One of
Pedersen,
us, one of us predicted. I'm going to throw you under the bus. One of us predicted a Vancouver Canucks playoff appearance.
yeah, that's you won't be seeing that next year. I'll tell you that for free. You won't be seeing that the next time around when we do the predictions. But so would I be? Because for me, do I want us to be good next year? No. No, not at this point. I want us to be in the Landon DuPont sweepstakes. So, do I think there's any point in firing Adam Foote and bringing another coach with the advent of, trying to push for a playoff spot? God, no, that'd be the worst decision ever.
No,
But, okay, just let me finish this. The biggest indictment I have of Adam Foote so far this year is not even that the defensive structure has been completely terrible, which it has been. It's that over the last 3 months since the Quinn Hughes trade, they've been playing a lot of the young guys, which is good. They need reps, they need to get in the games, but I have seen little to no improvement from most of the young guys on the roster. And I think it's because one, the system itself does not insulate these guys, does not provide them with a structure that is conducive to them learning the game at this level and putting them in a position where they are supported by the veterans around them. Because you look at guys like Tyler Myers, he was having a down year. When Talkett was here, played the best hockey of his Vancouver Canucks career because the structure was so firm and everybody knew what they had to do. Everybody knew where they had to be. Adam Foote came in, and this is what blows my mind. He was a defensive coach last year. Defense was the only thing we were good at last year. We were so tight defensively. We weren't giving up anything. We couldn't score because we had no talent, but we weren't giving up anything. And Adam Foote came in and he said, okay, we're going to completely change that. No more is this a zone system. It's fully man on man. Everybody's just going to run around all the time, lose their guy, and we don't have the talent to overcome that. So one guy misses an assignment and boom, it's in the back of the net. Marcus Pettersson, god awful season this year because the system doesn't work for guys that don't have elite athleticism. If you don't have super athletic elite skaters, playing a man-on-man system is really tough because, like I said, if one guy misses their assignment, you're cooked. And now everybody's running around, and we just did not have the personnel to have that succeed. So,
I think some of the roster decisions, I'm just gonna hop in there. Some of the roster decisions were a little questionable as well. Scratching for me, a big one is scratching Ratu too many times when he was your most elite guy in the faceoff circle. Especially when you have players like Archie Baines that were getting top 6 minutes at the time. I think it comes to bringing up guys too soon. Unfortunately, the Canucks didn't really have anyone else. They did a bad job at insulating their roster in the case of injuries. Which, to your point, that leads back to the no foresight. So I 100% agree with you on that point. But I just want to say that's another issue with Adam Foss, some of those roster decisions as well.
totally 100%. Evander Kane playing more than any other forward on the team at 5-on-5 this year, completely inexcusable. after the first 2 weeks of the season, I mean, I think everybody saw like, look, is he a bad hockey player? No, but he's not. It's doing nothing to earn this playing time over some younger guys or some guys that you don't know what's going to happen. Maybe like give him a shot. Nils Höglander gets scratched all the time. Is he the greatest defensive player in the world? No. But guess what? We're not trying to fucking win games. We've been out of the playoffs since November. Like, put the guy in the game, see if he can figure it out on the job. Like, I don't know. I think there's a solid chance he comes back, to be honest, based on what I'm hearing. But if they do change the GM, another reason is because he got a 3-year contract, and Aquilini does not like paying people to not work for the Canucks. He's not super free with the wallet. So
That's another lack of foresight. We should just have a checklist, a lack of foresight checklist.
yeah,
But you know what though? I think they both should be gone. And to your point is yes, the Canucks aren't trying to win next year. The Canucks could have the best coach in the world, whoever you think that is, whether you want to make the argument for John Cooper or for Paul Maurice or for, somebody else. But at the same time, the Canucks, no matter who's behind the bench, they're not going to win with this roster. So to your point, the lack of improvement to me is alarming. I think it's the perfect time to give Manny Malhotra a chance. He spent time with most of this roster, and Abbotsford won a Calder Cup with them. So to me, Rick Tocchet may have been the perfect coach actually for this roster. They let him go. That was a bit of a whoopsie. Well, they didn't let him go. He chose to leave. I should say he chose to leave.
yeah,
So to be
yeah.
fair, you can't put that on anyone internally in the organization. Uh, but in terms of where they move forward, don't go out and spend money on bringing in a coach with experience. To me, the familiarity that Malhotra has crafted with a lot of these young guys, it's worth having Malhotra be the coach of the Vancouver Canucks next season.
Yeah. I agree with you. In a perfect world, that's what I do. But I think Manny Mahot is going to have interest from a number of jobs. He's already spent time in Toronto. He was an assistant coach there before getting the Abbotsford Canucks head coaching job. He's been linked to that. Um, does he want
I
to take this Canucks job as his first
I
NHL head coaching?
I think it's just the mentality of you're already in the city, you're familiar with it. And to your point, yes, he's familiar with Toronto, but he's actively in the greater Vancouver area. He's treated very well here as a player, well respected as a player and a coach. I don't know what his family lifestyle is. I don't know too much about the personal life of Manny Malhotra, but I think there's also something to be said about, trying to succeed with the same group of guys. He has an emotional tie to a lot of these players that there may be an offer somewhere else that will pay him more money or has a better chance of winning immediately. Toronto definitely doesn't have a better chance of winning immediately, but maybe somewhere else in the league does. I don't know. I think there's something emotional ties he has. Um, that being said, a big part of it could come down to who is the GM as well. Personally, I think Tom Fitzgerald will be a fantastic fit for the Canucks going into a rebuild. I think, in terms of moving guys off of contracts, bringing in complementary players, I think that can go very well. However, the other two teams we mentioned, the Toronto Maple Leafs and the Nashville Predators, I think it's way more likely that Fitzgerald ends up on one of those teams. Um,
Yeah.
Everyone wants to be in the spotlight when you're a professional athlete or a professional GM or coach. You kind of have the mentality of you want all the glory, you want the cameras on you, and I think that's why all these big names always go to Toronto. They're the biggest hockey market in Canada, arguably the biggest hockey market in the league. They are the biggest hockey market in the league. Most successful, no, but I'd say they are the biggest hockey market in the league. So a guy like Tom Fitzgerald, who has that competitive edge, like most GMs, may want to go there, get all the glory of being in the front office of the Toronto Maple Leafs. Your other option, the Nashville Predators. I talked about emotional ties with Manny Malhotra. Tom Fitzgerald was the first ever captain in franchise history. The Nashville Predators captained them for 4 seasons, I believe. So to me, that's probably his number one choice. I would think is to go back there and be the general manager of the Predators. So I wouldn't be surprised to see if that happens.
That's a solid pull from you. I had no idea he was their first captain. I think that's probably the most attractive job right now from a GM standpoint is the Predators.
They're also
So
the closest to being competitive
yeah,
as a team. Like they're fighting for a wild card spot right now.
yeah. I will say, they had a fucking god awful deadline. They did the thing that the Canucks did last year where they didn't sell off any assets and move themselves into like, look, we're pretty good. Let's foster our young guys, get some more competition. They also didn't add anything to help a playoff push, so that was just brutal. But yeah, I could see Tom Fitzgerald going there. Before we wrap things up, though, good friend of the show, Gavin Ma has sent me a tweet from Thomas Strantz, which makes me kind of want to jump off the Lionsgate bridge right now.
So it has something to do with the Canucks.
It does. So listen to this. There is a distinct possibility, however, that the Canucks will explore their options on the trade market this summer and will be open to utilizing their various extra second and third round picks in trades that return younger players with the ability to contribute at the NHL level on a more expedited timeline. Shoot me right in the fucking forehead with a 12 gauge shotgun.
So they're not doing the full rebuild. But this kind of leads to your point where Alvin and Foot, Aquilini probably doesn't want to move off them for financial reasons, and if they stay, like Alvin's Alvin's not gonna stay and just suck on purpose, right? Because if he was going to commit to a full rebuild, he would have done it already. And knowing our owner as well as we do, I say our because we both grew up in the greater Vancouver area. Um, you made a really good point. It is all dollars and cents to Francesco Aquilini. He's raised season ticket prices by 10%, which
Which
is
is just insane. What a fucking slap in the face. Like,
and and yeah, I was mad about it until I heard Sid Sixero's point. Which if we got 6 minutes left, we can just stick with the Canucks might as well. But that being said, the best way to put fans in the seats with raised prices is be competitive sooner. The only problem is that the Canucks ceiling, or not even their ceiling, the Canucks floor is so low at this point with elite level talent, no matter who they bring in, like they're not going to be competitive. No matter who you bring in, it's not going to work.
right.
They just
No one's
don't have that upside on their roster right
no
now.
one's coming here. You're not convincing anyone to come here of their own free will. You like that just you're gonna have to trade for guys. You're gonna have to give up future assets, which is just moronic. Because like you're saying, it doesn't matter what we do next year. We're gonna be bad. And this goes back to my point. You can lose with intention, or you can lose by accident. And reading that tweet, it seems to me they're definitely going to go back to losing by accident next year if that's what they do, moving out draft capital for guys that if a team's willing to move on from a young guy, obviously he's not a fucking elite talent. Like no shit. So it's
Yeah, that's a good point. It's very rare. Sometimes players need a change of scenery, and when they're a young guy to get their career going. But I also look when those moves happen, those players usually move to teams that are insulated with veteran presence and guys who drive the play, right? Like that's how they get their confidence back, is you generally are either paired up with a guy if you're a defenseman, or you're on a line with a guy offensively who is an elite level talent who can drive the play, where you really all you need to do is create space and go to the net. You put a few pucks in the net, it gets your confidence going. You learn from those type of guys off the ice at practice, their habits behind the bench. The Canucks don't have those players. They don't have players that can change, that can affect change enough to influence the career trajectory of a younger player in the National Hockey League being moved away from another team. This sounds like a disaster to me, but it also kind of sounds like typical Canucks to me.
yeah. Should anybody be surprised? No. I'm sure if they do make a trade like that, they move second round picks or third round picks or whatever for young guys. I guarantee you we're going to be hearing well, next year we'll get a full year of a healthy Thatcher Demko. Yeah, fucking right. Like the guy can't string together 5 games without getting some sort of ticky-tack injury. And I'm not coming down on him. I feel bad for him. Obviously, nobody wants to get injured. Like, obviously, he's more affected than anyone else by the fact. But it's just a fact. It's just a fact of life. He's injury prone. He cannot play a, a large amount of games in a row without dealing with some sort of injury. And yeah, we're in a hellhole right now. We're in a hellhole right now here in Vancouver. All I can say is at least we're not the Toronto Maple Leafs, but that's not really a
You're
super.
not far
we got better young players than they do, but further
Yep.
this goes on and the mismanagement continues, I mean, none of them are going to pan out. Let's be honest. So it's awesome. I love being a Canucks fan. It's awesome.
Yeah, this isn't going well. And you know what? And just to your reaction about the season ticket prices getting raised 10%, we don't know what the single game ticket prices will be, but we can assume that there's going to be a raise to those as well. I was outraged by this when I first heard of it. I was the same reaction as you. I'm like, what the fuck? This is the worst team in the league this year. The Canucks have less wins in an 82 game season than the expansion Vancouver Grizzlies did in the NBA. To put that in perspective. But I watched Sid Sixero. I can't take credit for this point. He's the one who made the point first, but I do agree with him. If you are mad about a 10% increase to season ticket prices, stop buying season tickets. There's no reason for you to do so. And the quickest way to
True.
teach Mr. Aquilini a lesson is if people stop buying tickets to the games. Do not pay elite prices for a subpar product. That is my message to Canucks fans.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Awesome. This is the first time in Canucks history that the team will not win double-digit games on home ice in a season. So that just further goes to show it's completely unbelievable that they're raising season ticket prices when, you are just spitting out garbage every night. But yeah.
Not to mention it's in Vancouver too, right? Like if you raise season ticket prices in a struggling team in Texas, let's say, that's one thing. Vancouver, the cost of living is insane. These fans cannot afford gas to come to the games. Buy a hot dog at the games. Now, to be fair, those fans probably aren't buying season tickets. But the point I'm just trying to make is Vancouver's economy is absolutely down the drain. So 10% in Vancouver is going to affect fans a lot more than 10% in, say, a Sunbelt state.
Yep. Real. Might want to take a page out of those Sunbelt markets, governments, and stop taxing your fucking people into death. But
Yeah.
anyways, that's all I gotta say.
Before we get into politics, we could spend another hour on that one. Um, you know, uh, yeah, we won't get into it. I don't want to get canceled.
Yeah.
We'll leave it at that. Thank you for tuning in. And next weekend we will see. We'll try and do a little we'll do a little playoff preview next episode. The playoff brackets aren't going to be exactly set, but we can definitely talk about who we think are contenders or not. So thank you for tuning in. As always, we appreciate it. If you're in the greater Vancouver area, go follow 39's Fine and you can see them at one of their gigs. And as always, like, subscribe, comments. We always love seeing your comments, whether you agree with us or disagree. We're happy to interact with you.